Welcome to the Self-Help Coaching Podcast, where insights, attitudes, and methods for success get illuminated. Learn what leaders and change workers have done and are doing now to create magnificent futures. We interview great guests who inspire you to overcome obstacles and achieve your goals. Be sure you visit our website at self-helpcoaching.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now, just relax as you listen. You can do something else, but be ready to make an important note. And let's get started.
Title of this interview is Resolving Inner Conflicts to Become Unstoppable. And my guest is Diana Vehuni. We'll be talking about the importance of identifying and resolving our inner conflicts that slow us down and often even stop us from achieving our full potential. So we'll be talking about the categories of achieving goals quickly, spiritual life coaching, procrastination, inner conflicts, science and spirituality, limiting beliefs, self-sabotage, decision-making, clarity, integration, fear, harmony. All of these things are actually key elements to be as successful as you can be, or even just more successful, because these things are all factor in one way or another. So let me tell you about Diana Vehuni. She is a spiritual life coach and an artist. As a multidisciplinary practitioner, and I love that, she offers various approaches, tools, and techniques, and often combines them for optimal results. Her greatest passion is to bring science and spirituality together to help her clients evolve into their best selves and enjoy truly successful lives. Dan, I gotta say, I love what you're about. Welcome.
Thank you, Tony, and I love your work, and I'm so excited to be here. So,
thank you very much. How did you get into coaching?
From my own journey, I have learned a lot myself because I struggled a lot in my life, and it was a combination of two things. One, I was always very curious about nature of reality, consciousness, and things like that, and I didn't find the answers. And so I was always a seeker from a very young age, and I was also struggling with depression, anxiety, and many things. So I think two together, pushed me to start really looking for answers, and I learned a lot to help myself, of course. And then eventually, because I cared about people, and it was the most important thing for me to be able to help. Even though I was an artist, for me, it wasn't an impactful enough way to make a difference in the world. So that's why I eventually started doing coaching and counseling to help people with the challenges that I overcame. And I knew there's so many great tools and practices that I could teach them. And
I love it. I'm very similar, though I didn't suffer from depression or anxiety. I was an addict. Now I've been clean and sober a very long time, but that was my cross to bear, as it were. I'm an artist as well. I was an actor. I will be getting back into it. I used to sing for a punk rock band. Used to have a mohawk like this and all that. And to me, I see life as art. I see life as art, and this is my art. And everything I do is art. So I just, I try to blend some science, logic, right, real knowledge with the unique Tony, right, so that I don't just do some person showing up. I do Tony showing up, right? That's the way I go about it. So I see life as a wonderful tapestry for me to create my art, and every moment is an opportunity. So I want to get right into the kind of stuff that you work with clients. So my first question is, what are inner conflicts and how do they show up?
Right. Yeah. So they show up in different ways, but probably in most common ways they show up is that people feel stuck. They feel like they don't know where to go. They have some ideas, they have some inspirations, but they don't know how to proceed. Right. Another possibility is that procrastination. Right. They feel inspired occasionally, but it's not consistent. So that's another way it shows up, and it can show up as different emotions as well, right? But what are inner conflicts? The way I like to see, look at life, sometimes it's very helpful, and I think you probably would resonate with it too. It's like seeing it as flow of energy, right? So we're constantly exchanging energy, we're giving energy. Everything takes energy, right? To create our life, it takes energy, whatever we do. So when we have an inner conflict, it's like our energy is split, right? It's like energetically, it's like part of us is going in one direction. It's like one foot is stepping in one direction, another foot is stepping in another direction, and we can't move forward, obviously. Or part of us emotionally and energetically is still stuck in the past. There's some unresolved stuff from the past that keeps us from moving forward. So I use the analogy of a light bulb versus laser to kind of illustrate, what does it mean to be coherent with our energy, right? Because they both generate photons, right? Light particles. But in one case, with a light bulb, that it goes in every direction, it creates some light, right? And with the laser, it's coherent and it's so powerful it can cut through a rock, right? So we want to be more, it's directed in one direction. So we want to be more like a laser in terms of alignment, right? When our thoughts, our feelings, and our core values and our actions are aligned, we become unstoppable. Because even if there are obstacles outside or apparent obstacles or challenges, we see them as opportunities, right? But when we are conflicted inside, it needs to be resolved before we can do that, right? Once we resolve those inner conflicts, I do believe we can become unstoppable.
Absolutely. I mean, what you're talking about, and I was a life coach, and I'm the head of a technological coaching company now. We're creating a revolutionary app. Would have been launched already, but we're undercapitalized. But when I was a life coach, and I'm dealing with my own life, I know about getting people unstuck or helping or getting unstuck, and procrastination, which is perhaps the most common human complaint, right? And alignment is quite simply the answer. Whenever we have two elements, call it, that are not in alignment, they call it the thing you want to do, and call it the thing that it's giving you the payoff, then you're not going to get it. You're not going to go anywhere, right? At best, you go in a circle. You need to have a direction, just as you said. A laser is aimed at a target, so that's a direction. But then, even getting moving, maybe you know exactly where you want to go, but you're not getting moving because you don't have the alignment. You have something else taking your aim off, pulling you off into another direction. I want to do this, but I just want to relax and watch the TV. Well, if you can get the thing inside you that gets something from watching that TV, to get something from the thing you want to do, then you can be firing on all cylinders and get moving. And there's nothing like it, because that's really, I love self-help, but if self-help worked, I would have been a millionaire many years ago. Because the reason why it doesn't, I contend it doesn't work for the most part, because people are left with the same problems that they started with it when they're doing with it. Because often there's nothing like the expert helping you, like Diana helping you. There's nothing like it. See, most people are not into self-help, I contend, because they fear failure. There are other reasons, certainly, but even less people want to coach like you or me, because they especially fear failure in front of someone else, right? Even though they fear being judged, but obviously, I mean, you know this, and most people might suspect this, that any coach that judges her client is a terrible, terrible coach, right? And I'm sure you wouldn't do it, but people fear it nonetheless. We fear things. What we fear, it doesn't matter how imagined and unreal they are. That's irrelevant. But the thing is, there's nothing like, the truth of it is, there's nothing like having a coach help you, because a coach sees things that the person doesn't, right? And the coach has the training and expertise to techniques or whatever to help a person get through, under, around whatever obstacles, get aligned, as you so succinctly put. So I love it. It's I love and that's why I created this app, Proficio, which is a combination of self-help and coaching. It's the world's first self-help coach. Though we're not going to replace real coaches like yourself yet, Diana, because there's nothing like the real person that not only is an expert like yourself, but also empathizes, because empathy goes a long way.
Absolutely. It's so important. Yeah. And yeah, I absolutely agree with everything you said. It's I love to see, you know, what your app and what you're working on. I was looking at it, and it's really fascinating. And yeah, so great idea. I mean, I know it came from a lot of experience, right? You know, you find what's missing, and you want to, you know,
You,
provide
you,
that.
you want to talk about alignment, Diana? I've been at this over 8 years. If I didn't think it was the most promising thing I've ever been involved with, I would have quit long ago, because I haven't had a paycheck for this, at least for 8.5 years. I've been working on it, and the company's 4.5 years. We're undercapitalized, and would have launched, you know, and we had one setback after another. But I am aligned, so I keep at it, and that's the see. I mean, it's practically cliche that success, the key to success is persistence. Most people know that. However, you've got to also solve problems. You know, if you keep banging your head against the wall, eventually that wall is going to win. You ain't going to beat the wall, right? The wall will beat you. You have to say, oh, you know what? Let me go around the wall. You know, let me dig under the wall. Let me go over. You know, you have to solve problems, and you got to keep going. But if you're not aligned, if you don't deal with the issues that come up, they can stop you. So you need to have the wherewithal, and that wherewithal may be nothing more than having a coach to help you deal with that and not let you give up. Because I'm a practitioner of neuro-linguistic programming. Are you?
NLP, yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
And NLP has been controversial forever, but and a lot of the criticism is quite, it deserves a lot of criticism. But I'm here to say, in coaching, it's the most valuable thing I've ever seen. It works like a charm. It's designed to be used. There's lots of people that use NLP. You can use NLP as self-help. I got to tell you, when I use NLP on myself, I only get marginal results at best, for the most part. But when me as a coach or just as a practitioner use it with other people, I get great results, because there's that expert view. I'm not the person that's emotionally in the picture. I'm neutral, and I can observe it. And there's a big difference between having a person help you. There's nothing like, I'll bet you like this too, Diana. I mean, helping people is a universal value. Almost every person loves to help other people. But as coaches, especially when you get people, they come to you with a problem and you get them over it. It was one of the greatest kicks I've ever gotten. What about you?
I love it. I love seeing, how, when something shifts in their consciousness, right? And then they begin to look at life or their problem in a different way. And then something clicks, right? They have the epiphany, and it's so precious, to be somehow part of it and help people, because I know what it's like to be there, and how to overcome a challenge or something like that, right? To be able to help somebody with that, I think it's the most meaningful thing I can do with my life. And
it truly is one of the greatest things, and especially when it was a really bad problem. More than a few times after I helped a client resolve a problem, and I would ask them, how's that problem now? And they would say, what problem? And I would say, that problem you were just crying about 10 minutes ago. They're like, oh, that doesn't bother me anymore. And I'm like, yes. And then very often they're like, it was no big deal. I'm like, yeah, you were crying pretty badly about it 10 minutes ago. But it's great. You don't need the thanks. They give you, hey, they hired you for money. They're giving you the money. Then doesn't matter how they look at it. But it's such a great payoff emotionally as a person, getting people over or getting them unstuck or getting them past the hump. But when I was a life coach, most of what I did was help clients pursue goals, and also helping a person go from dysfunctional to functional. And obviously goal pursuit is a long process, right? The more difficult the goal is, the longer it is. But going from dysfunctional to functional was my favorite, because to see them go from basically speaking a frown to a smile is just a wonderful conversion.
Yeah, it is. It's, I mean, there's so many different types of coaching, right? So
Yes.
I do, and generally in coaching, we focus on the present and the future, right? But I do also focus on the past. And it sounds like in your work, probably you need to at least a little bit, right, to understand where they're coming from and,
Sure.
resolve whatever needs to be resolved from the past in order to take them to the next level. And I think what I found is a lot of those inner conflicts are coming from the past, right? And one of
Mhm.
the probably the most common is not feeling good enough, right? Not feeling
Oh
on an
boy.
unconscious level. Yeah, of course I deserve all the good things I want, but we're constantly sabotaging ourselves without even realizing we're doing that. So we need to understand where it's coming from and change that. And of course, that's probably one of the things that takes the longest because it took years to develop those beliefs about ourselves, right? And we didn't even know any better as children, right?
Absolutely.
And we learned so much from our parents, and to be able to look at ourselves differently, right? Because as Maxwell Maltz said, so we cannot outperform our own self-image, right? It's so
Maxwell
powerful.
Maltz is one of my favorite old school self-help authors. He is the man. I
Yeah,
love him.
yeah, absolutely. And to because a lot of people, because they've been so externally validated as children, they continue to expect other people to tell them how worthy they are, right? How would other people know how worthy you are? You have to tell them, right? By
Excellent point.
living that.
Excellent point. And beliefs are everything. And what? So let's take a moment to hear from our sponsor because we're going to get into that. We're going to get into these conflicts more. Diana's going to go deeper and elaborate on the dynamics of these conflicts. So we'll take a moment to hear from our sponsor and we'll come right back with Diana Vehuni.
This episode of Self-Help Coaching is brought to you by Perficio. People start something, then something comes up, or they need a break or even a vacation, and they often never get back on track. Perficio is designed to allow all of this. Visit www.perficio.io. That's PERFICIO.io, where you can live your life as you learn and make progress toward your life-changing goals.
You're listening to the Self-Help Coaching Podcast with me, your host, Tony Petrozza. I'm having a fantastic conversation with Diana Vehuni. She is a spiritual coach, as well as other kinds of coaching. She's out in LA, which I lived out there a long time ago, and they kicked me out. They said, get back to New York. How long have you been out in LA, Diana?
24 years.
Yeah, I was out there in the early 90s, so you were right behind me out there.
Yeah, I
Okay,
missed you.
okay, let's get it more into conflicts because this is really a critical topic. All right, so how can being conflicted inside slow us down and even stop us from achieving our goals? I mean, you alluded to it. You talked about the laser, but talk about some of the dynamics, and so maybe the person can understand it more.
Right. So it can it will definitely slow us down, and in some cases can stop us altogether, because if we are conflicted, again, it's like we are part of us, because we think of ourselves as like one entity, but it's not entirely true, because we have different aspects of ourselves, right? And we have different sub personalities, right? And if they're not in agreement with what we want for the whole being, then they have different agendas, right? I mean, ultimately, they all want the same thing. They all want us to be safe, to be happy, and etc. But maybe they have different strategies in trying to achieve it, right? And that can be conflicted. So, like, oh, being in this relationship could be the right way to do it, or being in a different relationship could be, or this career or that career, or etc. Right? And sometimes people don't know what they want because they are conflicted, because they don't know who they really are. And I think we can't talk about inner conflicts without talking about our goals. Oh, hello, kitty.
Look who just visited me, Diana, one of my cats. This is
Oh,
Lucius.
Lucius.
I'm sorry he was
No worries.
interrupting.
No
Yeah,
worries.
absolutely. Absolutely. You
Yeah.
know what that reminds me of? John Overdurf. Do you know who he is? He's an NLP therapist. But he once said something which totally is true. He said that the beliefs that control us most, we are unaware of. And when I was learning that, I was like, wow, this is so absolutely true. And the way to become aware of them is to see, what you want to do and what's stopping you, and then ask yourself questions. Why are you being stopped? And then now you can become aware of them. But it's so funny. Most people think that this never ceases to amuse me, that their brains are, what's in charge, and that's how they go through life using their brain. When truly the purpose of the brain is just to keep us alive, like every other animal that has a brain. That's not, our mind is in charge, and our mind uses the thinking organ, but it's also spiritual. There are other parts. There are parts of it that you can't put your finger on. That's abstract. So, and people think that, like, for I mentioned I was a recovered drug addict. That my addiction, I thought my addiction was a control, and it was, as long as I let it stay in control, until I finally put my mind to taking the control of my life, which I am the natural master of which is of myself. And every person is that person, the master, but they have to use their mind for it, and they have to go in and find out, where are my conflicts.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. And sometimes I know that's not part of coaching generally, but sometimes it is also helpful to take a more somatic approach too, because sometimes mind, it can only take us so far, right? Because especially, there's been trauma or something like that. Sometimes it's not on the level of the mind, it's not on a cognitive level. You ask people, they're like, no, everything is fine. And then, but from their reactions that, there's a lot of frozen energy from trauma that has never been really taken care of, right? It hasn't been healed, right?
Totally.
It's so crucial to also include that. That's why I do work with energy as well as part of my work, because sometimes there's a lot of bypassing happening. And I'm sure you're aware of that, how people are trying to, do all the work here, and, they disconnect from those, the shadow, right? Which is not really the bad or the negative, but our shadow is those parts of ourselves that haven't been illuminated, right? And there's a lot of good stuff in there too. Actually, even Carl Jung himself said that 90% of our shadow is pure gold.
I
Right?
love
That's
it.
not what
I
we
never heard
hear.
that. That's
That's
great.
right. Interesting, right? We always think
Yeah.
of the shadow as those negative parts of ourselves that we, try to, push aside or push away. And but there's so much, anything that's been hidden, anything that's been suppressed becomes the shadow, but it doesn't mean it's all bad. There's a
Yeah.
lot of good in there too, but some of it is like, maybe it's not appropriate in the society to express sometimes, like there's some of that. And for some people, it's their spirituality that they have to hide that aspect of themselves because people would not understand them, right, around them. And then they have to kind of hide that they are spiritual or they're interested in those kind of things, right? That can become part of their shadow too. So I find it to be so powerful to explore that aspect of people's lives, and doing some inner child work is super powerful too. So I think that's why I'm more multidisciplinary practitioner, because
I
I
love
think
it.
all of that is important.
I think that you got the package, because if you just did one, if you only had just one or two things in your forte, you could only operate in that modality. You're rather constrained. But if you do it in a multidisciplinary way, like yourself, you can really cover the whole person. I think especially the energy part, going back in the past. The past, as you said, you articulated perfectly. Coaches focus on the future. But that doesn't mean the past doesn't have an effect. It certainly does, more than anything, especially traumatic past. And a person's, if they don't deal with that trauma, they typically relive it, and they get stopped by it. Can you mentioned some inner child work? How do you go about that typically, or simplistically?
Right. Probably the simplest way is to, well, of course, once I discover there is something pretty much in every single person, there is something between them. I mean, when I say between them, it's like their inner child shows up in their lives, right? And in many, many ways, and understanding what's really going on. And what I suggest, the simplest exercise to do, is I ask them to bring a picture of themselves as a child, as at the time when something significant happened in their life, and have that picture with them. And when they have a conversation with their inner child, they look at the picture. It's even better when in the picture they look at the camera, which means like they're looking at each other, right? It's so powerful. There's so many things, they can tell their inner, their little boy, little girl, and have them speak back, right? Because there's so much we were unable to say as we were children, right? And a lot of things were not understood or accepted or validated. So we become that parent to our inner child, right? We reparenting ourselves. When instead of having that inner critic, I suggest to have that inner parent that is loving and caring and compassionate, but also very encouraging, right? So that's really, I think it's been so powerful
That's
for
a
me.
great technique. I love it. I remember when I first got introduced to NLP, who was by my acting mentor, George Morrison, who was the guy behind Dustin Hoffman, Gene Hackman. You're a lot younger than I am, but these were big stars back in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, of course, I know them.
Okay, very good. And he introduced me to NLP, and he blew me away. And one of the things he introduced me to was Gestalt therapy. Gestalt. Obviously, you know it. And Gestalt therapy, he had, he talked about it what he described was imagining your parents sitting over there in that other chair. Obviously, no one's sitting there. And now, what would you say to them? Now, you did an inverse there. The person being the parent saying it to themselves with a picture. There's not even, you don't have to imagine. You'll just look at the lines on the photo. But a lot of people don't. They may poo-poo this. It may be unfamiliar or sound weird. But what they don't understand is that the human mind is just so incredible. We think metaphorically, we think so multi-dynamically that all sorts of things can be used by the mind to not just process the world, but to process its own thinking. And if you don't think that that acting as your parent, talking to your younger self has any value, it's only because you haven't discovered the value yet.
Yeah, absolutely. It's super. The truth is that we are always talking. We have that inner parent, except it's a very critical and unkind parent, right? So we all have pretty much internalized the voice of one of our parents or caregivers, somebody who was very, important in our life, right? As we're growing up. So when we criticizing and feeling not good enough, it's not us, really. Nobody was born not feeling good enough or feeling that something's wrong with them. We learned that, right? So we already have that voice. It's really about transforming that into the voice of a kind of a parent that we wish we had, right? Of course, they did their best, right? It's not that anything is wrong with them. Our parents did their best with their own trauma, with their own stuff, but it is now our responsibility as adults to continue that parenting for ourselves.
I love it. And I love the existential paradigm. I read this long ago and I had memorized it immediately. It was so profound to me. And it's this: the existential paradigm is, as children, we're not responsible for what happens to us, but as adults, we're responsible for every single action we take. So if you're hurt, if you're quote unquote broken, well, it's your responsible to heal or to fix yourself or whatever, because you are an adult and you are responsible, period.
That's right.
It doesn't matter what excuse you got, what circumstance. The excuses are almost always bullshit. And circumstances are just that. That's all they are.
Absolutely.
We are responsible, and we do heal and we do get over things, and how quickly you want to do it is up to you. You can go about it slowly, or you can go about it quickly. You can talk to a person like Diana and go about it quickly, or you can just take your time and read, or if you want to read some self-help books or whatever, or not do that at all and just do it your own way. Everyone's on their own journey, but people who understand that time is running out for all of us. Those are the kinds of people that they hire a person like Diana Vehuni and say, Diana Vehuni, I want to get unstuck because I'm running out of the most valuable thing I have, which is time. And there you go. Let's take a moment to hear from our sponsor. We can say something, Diana?
No, we'll
Okay,
continue.
that's all right. Very good. This is an audio podcast, though. Diana and I seeing each other, and this will be on YouTube as well. And I recommend for anyone listening, you can go to YouTube, because I may be very ugly, but Diana is not. So you can check her out on YouTube. But we'll come right back with Diana Vehuni.
This episode of Self-Help Coaching is brought to you by Proficio. What is the key to wealth? It's not just making money. It's not wasting it. Avoiding debt and costly mistakes. To get the wealth mindset, visit www.proficio.io. That's FICIO.io, where you can start acting like a millionaire instead of just dreaming to be one.
You are listening to the Self-Help Coaching Podcast with me, your host, Tony Petrozza. We're having a wonderful conversation with Diana Vehuni talking about the mind and coaching, getting unstuck. And, we were just talking about conflicts, and we're going to get more into this because this is a very important topic. I was just having a conversation with my girlfriend last night, and I was telling her about, some NLPs. I was doing some submodality work with her, just casually. And then I told her about an NLP technique called change personal history, which is similar. I see the smile erupted on Diana's face for those listening. She's quite familiar with it, which is where you go back in time in your mind and imagine giving your younger self the resources that would help you deal with the trauma that you suffered, and then come through life in your mind with that resource and imagining how things would be different, and then coming back to the present. Okay, it could be a very useful technique. But other things I was talking about core transformation, something I worked with before from Connie Ray Andreas. I also trained with her with the wholeness technique, her next thing, which is very cool. That's similar. But these have to do with conflict. That's what they have to do with. We have these conflicts, and really their resolutions are what it's all about. I've talked about this on the podcast before, but I'm really getting into it with you, Diana, because I know that's a specialty of yours, and I really appreciate that. So why do we have these inner conflicts? I mean, we alluded to it, but let's go a little deeper.
Right. So there are different types of conflicts, you can say, right? So I just made a few notes for myself. So just wanted to mention a couple of them that people can be more aware of, right? If they possibly have them. So one, we talked about a little bit about, not feeling good enough, right? And on the conscious level, we know that we deserve, but on the subconscious or unconscious level, we don't. So that's a conflict, right? So we try to achieve things, we take actions, but we're sabotaging ourselves in some way. Another very common one, especially for spiritual people, although most people, but spiritual people more have this conflict. It's having this conflict between being spiritual and wanting more prosperity, more money, right? And then because a lot of us don't think that having money
bad.
It's bad. You want to be one of those bad people who cheat and steal and commit a crime to get a lot of money. So of course, and in a way, we might even justify that, I don't have a lot of money, but at least I'm a good person or something like that, right? So we all probably struggle in some way, and I definitely did. And before I was able to change my relationship with money altogether. Of course, money itself is not negative, right? So it's not bad, it's neutral. So what we do for money and what we do with money,
and it's pretty damn useful in society.
Absolutely. It's we can't get rid of money in our life, right? I mean, we kind of have it anyway. So, but we want to have a healthy relationship with it. So when we think of money, actually, I heard of this really cool exercise, and I like to take my clients through it. It's very quick. You're just imagining being in a room with a human that represents money. Right? What does money look like if it was a human, right? What do we see and how we relate? Are we on the same level? Are we standing up and this person is sitting down, or what? What is our relationship? It's a subconscious relationship with the money. And I used to think of money, it showed up as a, like a banker type, like somebody in a black suit with a suitcase full of money, with black glasses, kind of distant and cold, kind of unreachable, inaccessible, right? And I was like, well, no wonder I'm struggling with money, until I changed that. And now what I see when I think of money is this beautiful spiritual woman who's like doing so much good in the world and is prosperous because of it, right? And the more money she makes, the more good she does in the world, right? Wonderful. And suddenly it's like, oh my God, I want to be that, right?
Yes.
So we need to have a very clear idea of how we think about money, because money,
a clear idea that's positive and that's not discouraging or detrimental. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So that's a very common conflict we have. Another one is what you can say, between our soul desire and our ego desires, right? That could be another conflict that sometimes we're like, oh, okay, is wanting something good or is it bad? And I had that experience when I started spirituality from the Buddhist traditions, and I thought like, oh, wanting desire is the problem. I shouldn't want anything, right? And of course, for a while I felt good, but then after a while I was feeling so unsatisfied. It's like, okay, that doesn't work either, right? At least in this society, in this world. So finding a way to balance our mind and our heart, right? Our brain and our heart, heart-brain coherence is a good approach to that, right? Creating that synchronization, so we don't have to choose one over the other. But then also realizing that we have desires for a reason, and it's not that all desires are coming from our ego. It's actually, the universe or God or creator, whatever, however you want to say it, wants something to be expressed or to be experienced through us, right? So we have it. It's not coming from our selfish self, right? I mean, yes, we can differentiate those desires, but we want to have desires, and it's a good thing that we want things, right?
It's a critical part of the human experience.
Yeah.
And you know what? Robert, I read a lot of Robert Dilts, if you know who he is, if NLP co-developer, but I think Success Factor Modeling is his new stuff. But he in his stuff he talks about the basically the ego side and the soul side. And when you can match those two counterparts between those two of what you want, now you're unstoppable. I mean, I think what you working when you a person will be unstoppable too. But that's it, because they're not necessarily in conflict. You just got to find how they fit together.
That's right.
Right. That's where it's at. There you go. Synchronicity. That's where it's at, because they do match. But if the things that don't match, just discard those. What matches? What can work together? Right.
Yeah.
Just because you want to do something you can't find, it may seem selfish or too humanistic. Well, not necessarily. Think about the other aspects of yourself that actually has great aspirations for that goal. What could you do with that? Let's say if you want to be really dull, I'll make $1 million. All right, that's a shitty goal per se. But what if you want to make $1 million so you can donate half of it to the charity? Okay, well, that's a damn good thing.
Right.
All right.
The why, right?
Right.
That's why it's so important to know
exactly.
why we want what we want.
Absolutely. And I really love what you said about self-love being a huge hurdle. Like I mentioned, I'm a recovered addict. I've been clean and sober over 22 years. And what I found in my early recovery, and you don't have to be an addict seeking recovery for this to resonate with you, is that the biggest hurdle that I had to get over was to love myself enough to think that I was worth it, because I never thought I was worth it before that. And that's why a primary reason why I always failed. Why put in all this effort if I'm not worth it, if I don't deserve it? You've got to, if you can't get to a point where you think that you're worth it, or that you deserve better things, then you must get with people that can hold you up for a while until you do, because this is a most necessary obstacle for you to get over. If you don't believe that you're worth it, or that you deserve good things, you're never going to have them, or they'll be still fall right through your fingers like sand, because you are on a mission of self-destruction. Like I was on a mission of self-destruction. Or if that's too, seems too much hyperbole, you've got to regard yourself well enough to treat yourself well enough. If you don't, you will not treat yourself well enough. And even if you can treat yourself well in the small, you won't treat yourself well in the big. And it'll just be a vicious circle. You'll go nowhere. And I learned this the hard way. I'm 57 years old. I'm a lot older than you. And so if I had learned some of the things that I learned earlier in life, I would have been so much far ahead. But I'm not poo-pooing it. I learned everything exactly the right time I was supposed to.
And you're absolutely right. Yeah. Self-love and, having healthy self-appreciation, self-respect, and self-love and sense of self-worth is crucial in, as Louise Hay would say, right? If we have any issue in any area of our lives, it's because we're not loving ourselves enough. And I saw it again and again in my own life and with my clients. And that's why the first thing that I work with my clients on is self-love, their own relationship with themselves. Because if that is not there, nothing else is going to really work. Because if you don't truly believe that you deserve the good things, again, coming back to the first thing we discussed, and we feel like worthy of taking care of ourselves, right? And doing all those good things for ourselves, right? And it's true. I mean, with in addiction, that's really, like shame being a big part of it, right? And then
Oh boy, that's the
even
big
though,
one.
yeah, in my way, I was addicted to certain kind of thinking. I was addicted to being very critical. Like those are, we all have different addictions, right? And that is an addiction to being unhappy. That was my addiction. It's that was my normal. I couldn't even imagine being anything else, even though I wanted to be happy, right? So I can totally understand, and that's probably the most important thing that changed my life, is to starting to love myself, not expecting other people to
So
tell
we
me that
are
I'm
in
lovable.
agreement again.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And I also like how you mentioned Louise Hay. You mentioned some really great self-help authors. So you know your stuff. I mean, that's just self-help, but you definitely know the craft of coaching, that's for sure. So unfortunately, we're gonna come to our last segment with Diana. So we've talked about some really great stuff. So we're gonna have our final break to hear from our sponsor, and it'll be the unfortunate last segment with Diana Vehuni.
This episode of Self-Help Coaching is brought to you by Perphysio. What if there was a self-improvement program truly personalized to you, that knew and cared for you deeply? That whatever was going on in your life adapted for you perpetually? Visit www.perphysio.io. That's PERFICIO.io, where you can start a program that will always suit you, considering all the pressures and nuances of your life.
You're listening to the Self-Help Coaching Podcast with me, your host, Tony Petrozza. We're having a fantastic conversation with Diana Vehuni. And, this is unfortunately the last segment. She's talked about so many great aspects of personal development and coaching. Let me back up a second. I know that you're an artist. What kind of artist are you?
I do all kind of art. Right now I'm not doing art as much, but I started as a traditional, I've been painting in oil, portraits, landscapes, watercolor, pastel, like you name it. Like I tried every technique in every genre. And then I started doing digital art, and that was more spiritual arts. And so right now I don't have as much time for creation, although I do. I picked up some candle making, and I made jewelry, like anything creative. Yeah, I love to create. So, but right now, I'm focusing on my work and creating content. That's not a way of creating. So, but definitely anything that allows that creativity.
I just had a conversation earlier with another great host, a guest from the podcast, Mila Johansson, and her forte is helping people write their book, and just talking with you, Diana, you got a great book inside you. If you haven't written it yet, I hear it. I hear it very much. You got some great stuff there for sure. Yeah,
I do. Actually, I have one book that I'm making it available for free right now on my website. So that's the one that people can get. It's called Introduction to the Art and Science of Real Magic.
Whoa! Repeat that title.
Introduction to the Art and Science of Real Magic.
Wow, very good. Real magic. I love that. Tell us about that book.
So
I want to hear about it.
Yeah, so it consists of 3 parts. So one part I'm talking about science. So what I discovered for myself. Okay, I'm not saying that I know the truth, but what I discovered myself, I was studying spirituality and science at the same time, and I love science as well because I'm coming more from a skeptical background, right, and being more like a skeptic, growing up in a family of mostly skeptical people, right? But then also we will also go to church, which was very confusing to me, right? If you don't believe in God, why would you go to church, right? That started my curiosity. And so I was always interested in science, especially neuroscience, right? And like unified physics models and things like that. So I explored different scientific models and things like that. And I draw parallels to spirituality, what mystics were saying, like how we are all one and how we're all connected. And then what's the inner world and outer world, like, and how everything is, like what's inside is also outside. And, and so everything I've learned, it's just like, I remember having all this epiphanies over and over. It's like, oh my God, they've been saying the same thing. It's just using different language, basically, right? Of the mystics over thousands of years from different cultures, people who haven't even met each other, they came to the same realizations. And then some of the greatest scientists, right? And whether it's Schrodinger, whether it's Nikola Tesla, or even Einstein, and they all saying the same thing about the universe being mental, it being intelligent.
I love a great quote from Einstein, and this is so telling. This guy is widely considered to be the greatest scientist ever, and he said, "Imagination is more important than knowledge."
Knowledge. That's right.
This is the greatest mind. Said
That's it.
imagination more important than knowledge.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
I agree with them. So you know what? Albert Einstein's ghost, if you're listening, Tony Petrozza agrees with you. How's that for validating? And that's absolutely correct. If you imagine a great future, imagine yourself getting over these obstacles, getting through them, getting with resourceful people and resources, then you can do it. But you have to imagine what's possible for you to start going in that direction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's why I like to bring the two together, science and spirituality, because then again, another integration, no conflict, right? Because there was a conflict, it's one is right, one is wrong. No, they're both right, right? Yes, not religion, religion maybe has some, dogmas and things like that. And science has its own dogmas, right? So when you get rid of the dogmas and you leave the essence of mysticism and the essence of real science, then you realize that they talk about the same thing. So in my book, I talk a little bit about that. And then I talk about, how can we apply that understanding, right? The practical, application, and how we can implement that in our lives. And then the third part is, why it doesn't work and what we can do about that. And so that's, like troubleshooting, so to speak, right? So it's an introduction because it's like it's a really good start, but, my goal is to, of course, develop it into probably even, bigger book or a course or something like that. But
okay, so that's your book though, right? The book on magic with the magic title. And people, where can people find it?
it's on my website. It's at dianavehuni.com, and they'll see.
That's let me spell it out. That's DIANAVEHUNI. Or we'll set up a profile page on our website for you, but Diana Vehuni, it's pretty simple.com. Go there, check out a book. So people can go to dianavehuni.com. You're on social media, you're on Instagram.
I'm everywhere.
And you got PhD after your name on Instagram. You got a PhD?
It's a metaphysical in metaphysics, which is it's a ministerial degree. But yes, it does. But I want to be clear.
All right, very good, very good, and excellent. You're on Facebook, and that's on Science of that the name.
It's called Science of Oneness. Yeah, I used to use that. I love that idea of Science of Oneness, and I just stayed there, right? And so I love it.
You're on Twitter, Diana Vehuni. You're on Pinterest. Like I said, we'll set you up with a profile page. You'll have all that. But I encourage you to go to dianavehuni.com. Check out her book. Check out her services. I imagine you do Zoom coaching too, or virtual coaching.
I primarily Zoom because all of my clients are somewhere else. They're not local.
When I was life coaching, I did all my coaching on the phone. I didn't do video, but and now that the pandemic is come and it's going, people say to me, "Oh, your app Proficio, which is going to transform." It basically it automates self-help so that a person is coached by a computer to be successful with self-help. They're like, "Oh, that's going to be huge for you because of the pandemic." I said, "Listen, the pandemic's got nothing to do with it, even though that's changed everything for everybody. And certainly, I'm in society with you. People want self-help to work, and even people who are like open-minded or into it, they get so little out of it. If they can get what they want out of it, then they're going to do it. And if a person, they don't have to be limited to Los Angeles at all to get the benefit of Diana Vehuni. Just go to dianavehuni.com and you can be coached by Diana. You can be in China, I guess maybe in free China, maybe not in red China, and get Diana's services as a spiritual life coach, energy healer. You consider yourself an energy healer or an energy worker?
I do some of it. Not primarily, it's not my primary focus, but definitely I do include that. Like I use EFT, emotional freedom technique, and other modalities that work with energy as well.
Diana, you have been a wonderful guest. I really appreciate it. Do you have a final remark for the audience?
Thank you so much, Tony. And it was a great conversation. And I really hope our audience learned something from it, valuable. I'm sure they did. And I appreciate our listeners joining in and being part of this conversation. And I guess one powerful question I like to leave our listeners with is that I discovered to be super powerful. It's asking ourselves who we want to become, not what we want to achieve, but who we want to become. And if you're encountering a challenge, we want to ask ourselves, who do I need to become to overcome that challenge? Because at the end of the day, that's the only thing that matters, who we become.
You and I are from the same tribe. In my app, Proficio, the very first question it asks the person interested in it, and before it even gets into any the self-assessments, it simply asks, who do you want to be? And they have to record the answer audio to the app. So if they try to back out, it's going to play for them. Oh, wait, didn't you say you want to be? Oh, yeah. That is a very powerful question.
That's right.
And questions are the answers. Great stuff. Dana, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And remember, everyone, we're all responsible for ourselves, and we could all use a little help. With that, thanks for listening to the Self-Help Coaching Podcast. Thank you, Diana.
Thank you for tuning in to the Self-Help Coaching Podcast, where insights, attitudes, and methods for success get illuminated. Learn what leaders and change workers have done and are doing now to create magnificent futures. Remember to visit our website at self-helpcoaching.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Self-Help Coaching Podcast.